All right, why don't we get started? We are right on time tonight. Not a minute past like last week. That was just ridiculous. But that was ridiculous, yeah. Threw the whole night off. Yes, can you believe we're in the 5th week of this? And yeah. 5th week already. Yeah, so why don't we open up with a word of prayer, and then we will get started on the first longer story that we have so far. All right. Father, thank you for this day. I thank you for everyone who was able to make it out, and I just pray that this time of study would be beneficial to us in a host of ways that we don't even know about yet. Just pray that you be with us during this study and open our eyes to the message you have in your word. In your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. All right, we're in Judges 4. Judges 4, talking about the story of Deborah.
Is that how we're pronouncing it?
Deborah?
Yeah. Well, I've heard many people pronounce it Deborah when it came to biblical scriptures.
I've never heard that.
I've heard it both ways. Yeah, I wrote Debbie.
Yeah, Debbie? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually the other guy who there's a little bit of back and forth on how to pronounce the name. So Barak, and I've heard Barak. And I think it's English or American or British pronunciation, because the Brits tend to emphasize the first syllable, like when they say garage instead of garage. So I think Barak is British. We're going with Barak. That's the name we're more familiar with as Americans. Okay, so not in your book, but my book's opening questions says, all right, you're in the army now. All right, imagine you're in the army. You're entrenched at the bottom of a hill. Enemies positioned in a heavily armed bunker at the top of the hill. Your commander says, charge up the hill. Don't worry, you'll be fine. Trust me. Would you lead the charge? And what would determine whether or not you would put the charge in your commanding officer?
If you trust him.
Okay.
I was studying I do weird things. I was studying about World War I.
Perfect.
That's weird. Anyway, they said what happened with the soldiers then, especially the Germans, they told them you have to go and do the offensive if you didn't go, or if you went and decided to come back, they would shoot you.
That's effective. So you're saying you would have led the charge. Yeah. Well, Kohler, that's German, so yeah.
It also depends what I think you think the overall outcome will be. If you think you got a shot and there's no way out of here, then go for it.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Okay, that's not what I expected that outcome to be. So if it's certain death, go for it. Okay, there's no retreat. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so imagine your commander led the charge. Would you follow him?
Yes.
There's still comes down.
We have a lot more certainty on that.
Well, it still comes down to where you trust them.
We'll back them up with like extra firepower
From a what? Little way. You'll lay down some cover. Yeah. We got you. You go for it. You got this. Yeah. All right, so page 45 in your book, because that will come up later. Page 45, your first questions, you have, along came a spider. Some people are so afraid of spiders, they can't muster the courage to kill one when it creeps into their presence. They go to get someone else to kill it, they leave the area, or they sit there and stare at it, hoping it will just go away. How do you respond when a spider is dangling in front of you?
Well, if somebody else can kill it, that's better.
Mm-hmm.
I scream and do something else.
Yeah.
That's a lady, like semi-attached to the church, sort of. That's a Facebook friend of mine.
Your wife, sure, yeah, I got you.
No,
Personal story.
No, it's only that takes pictures of them.
Takes pictures of them.
Yeah, pictures of them and post on Facebook about nature, about insects.
That's what it is.
If I had hairspray,
I kill it in a second.
Yeah.
that's
You
me too.
know, yeah.
Yeah, we kill it.
Some people like look around for I kill it, but I need a tissue or I need this or that. And if it's right there, and I wash my hands, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, is anyone afraid of spiders? Like, am I the...
No, I hate them.
Oh, okay, yeah. I can go on the offensive, but I despise them. Yeah. I had one fall on my face from the ceiling. Closest thing to a heart attack I've ever had. All right, so for those of us who don't like spiders, what, if anything, question 2, what, if anything, are you afraid might happen if you tried to kill it?
They'll come after me.
So the spider takes up a knife and just starts chasing you. That's the fear.
I don't want it to get wet,
Okay.
because then it's going to come back in there.
With more, yeah.
You know.
He's going to bring his friends.
They chase you, they get bigger, don't they?
Sounds like a dream I had. Yeah.
Really much stress.
And more than once, somebody said, yeah, it's like a movie ball.
All right, so this story that we're going to look at is about 2 women who showed courage to do much more than kill some spiders. So I don't know if you had a chance to read the text. So it asked you to read Judges chapters 4 and 5. And it does look like they just want you to read chapter 4, verse 5, but the semicolon implies that they're both chapters instead of chapter and verse. So if you read it, you noticed that chapter 4 was like the events that took place, this whole battle, everything that's going to happen with Deborah and Barak. And then chapter 5 is a song that it says Deborah and Barak sang this song. So I don't know if it's a duet. I don't know if they're going back and forth or if it's just a general Barak's there too. I don't know. I don't know if they rehearsed this. I have no idea. But the interesting thing is that the song, it's a song of praise, of thanks to God for what happened, but it expands on stuff that happened like in the events. So there's some basic things that happen in the story that in the story you're like, okay, whatever. And then in the song, they give a lot more explanation to it, which is kind of odd because, I don't know, you don't have the full story the first time through. You have to get to the song. And the book really doesn't emphasize that. Like, you have the story and you have the song. And they're related, they're different, but they're supplementary, and it's just an interesting paradigm that happens there. But let's start in chapter 4, and I'll just read verses 1 and 2. And the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord when Ehud was dead. And the Lord sold them into the hand of Jabin, king of Canaan, that reigned in Hazor, the captain of whose hosts was Sisera, which dwelt in Horosheth of the Gentiles. Okay, so it shouldn't be surprising. We've already seen this cycle of children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord. Interesting, though, whose death it starts off with. They started doing evil once Ehud was dead. So to me, that says that whatever Shamgar was doing, we read about him killing 600 people with his pointy stick. Maybe that happened contemporaneously with Ehud, because I did look at the maps for them. Ehud is more centered in the country around Jericho, whereas Shamgar, the city they say he was in, is way up north near Mount Hermon. And so there must have been some co-judging going on at that time. Just worth saying. So they kind of consider Ehud the major judge, that after he's gone, that's when they start doing evil again. Okay. All right, on page 46 of your book, we see that Jabin, king of Canaan, he reigned in Hazor. Now, we've actually heard, not in this study, Joshua destroyed Hazor. in the book of Joshua, when they first go through the conquest of the Promised Land, it's one of the few cities that they actually burn to the ground. They usually don't do that because it's a perfectly good standing city. And it's interesting, Hazor was a really big, well-fortified city in the ancient Near East, and they have like 2,000 plus years of civilizations that, as you dig down further, you can see different eras of when people lived there. And they actually have come across like 3 feet of ash at a certain point, where it was clearly utterly burned to the ground. And then at some point later, people kept rebuilding because it's just a good geographical area. And once again, we kind of see that we talked about last week or the week before that the Israelites had a tendency to like destroy things well and then not occupy them. So they could destroy stuff. They couldn't always follow through on building, and there's probably something there, but the book doesn't get into that. It's interesting, or I think it's interesting. Judges 4:3. The children of Israel cried unto the Lord, for he, that's Sisera, he had 900 chariots of iron, and 20 years he mightily oppressed the children of Israel. Okay, so we have the situation, they're being oppressed by Jabin. It's odd. Jabin's the big bad, but he's not really the character you're dealing with in the story. Jabin is a king among the Gentiles, among the Canaanites, and his captain below him, like his enforcer, the captain of his army, is closer to Israel. They're camped closer. They kind of are keeping that under their boot. So where have we heard, tell me about the chariots of iron. What have we talked about with them before?
Some of the tribes that they were getting the book had chariots as well, they didn't want to go up against.
Yeah, so that's interesting. The last time we heard about chariots of iron, they were the people that, we can't drive them out. They have these tanks rolling around, and yeah.
So these iron chariots are Israel's spiders.
Yeah, that's...
They're afraid of them all the time. They're afraid of them like it's like those.
Yeah, big iron spider, yeah. All right, who has Judges 5:8? Okay, could you read that, please?
They chose new gods. Then was war in the gates. Was there a shield or spear seen among 40,000 in Israel?
Okay, did you guys understand what that just said? Okay. No, not everyone did. Can you read that again?
They chose new gods. Then there was war in the gates. Was there a shield or spear seen among 40,000 in Israel?
Yeah, so the implication is no. There was not a shield or spear among 40,000 in Israel. Okay, knowing what we know about Sisera thus far, what we know about Israel thus far, what are our odds looking like if this comes to a fight? Not good. Understatement of the year. Yeah, this is not a great situation. Okay, we have the setup there. Okay, we have the basics. They did evil again. God judged them again. He gave them over to Jabin. They're being enforced by Sisera. Israel doesn't have much of an army. Maybe this is due to the fact that they're being oppressed. It says mightily oppressed by Sisera. We'll get into some other possible details of that later. And Sisera has 900 iron chariots. And that would make up a very small portion of your army. That's like your tank squadron, and then you would have a whole host of all your other troops. So he's got a pretty big force going. And that's the setup. Now we get to our main character, Deborah. Look in verse 4. And Deborah, a prophetess, the wife of Lapidoth, she judged Israel at that time. And she dwelt under the palm tree of Deborah, between Ramah and Bethel, in Mount Ephraim. And the children of Israel came up to her for judgment. Okay, so she is the only female judge that we get in the book of Judges. And it's interesting, she's a prophet, which is different. There aren't that many female prophets. Can you guys think of other female prophets in the Bible? What?
Well,
You're smiling like...
oh, I could think of some people, ladies who think they're prophets now, but not here, not here.
They can clear that.
There are probably some TV ones,
So prophetess,
Yeah. Yeah, they tend to call them prophetess.
politically correct.
Well, it's like an actor, that can be both genders, Yeah, that's what we're rolling with. There weren't many, and that's why you're all drawing blanks. And they tend not to have big roles. Do you have one?
It's unusual. There is one or two more, but I can't.
Yeah. So there's a woman named Anna in the book of Luke who has a word from the Lord. She seems to be like almost the equivalent of a Jewish nun, sort of living in the temple. Philip has 2 daughters who, they call them virgins, so I don't know if they're just 4? Okay, I don't know if they're just young or if it's also like a lifelong celibate office where they seem to prophesy. In the book of Revelation, there's a woman who is a false prophet in one of the churches that God condemns. But yeah, this doesn't happen very often. So she is a prophetess, she's the only female judge, and she sits in a palm tree that she seems to own, the palm tree of Deborah. And people come to her, and she, I'm sure, mixing her prophetic gift with helping people, informing people. And then the action starts to take off. Okay, in verse 6. And she sent and called to Barak, the son of Abinoam, out of Kadesh Naphtali, and said unto him, Hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, Go and draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men of the children of Naphtali and of the children of Zebulun? And I will draw to thee the river Kishon, Sisera the captain of Jabin's army, with his chariots and his multitude, and I will deliver him into thine hand. Okay, so that's the plan. Actually, why don't we read more of that? Verse 8. Barak said unto her, If thou wilt go with me, then I will go. But if thou wilt not go with me, then I will not go. And she said, I will surely go with thee. Notwithstanding, the journey that thou takest shall not be for thine honor, but for the Lord. For the Lord shall sell Sisera into the hand of a woman. And Deborah arose and went with Barak to Kadesh. Okay, we'll go over the basics of the military plan in a minute. What do you think about Barak's request?
Well,
He wasn't going to go on just her recommendation.
Why?
I guess he probably couldn't trust in her vision or whatever.
Okay. Kind of the difference between the commander sending you and you following the commander. Okay.
Or maybe he thought that if she was with him, he'd be more likely to succeed.
Okay, you have the holy woman with you in a sense.
You'd be more inclined that she believed what she said, that there'd be victory.
Yeah.
Like, there's going to be victory, you go do this, and I'm going to sit under the palm tree. So
Yeah.
it probably gave some confidence, I guess.
Yeah, do you think this is like a good thing? Like, okay, so when Israel goes out to war sometimes, they bring the Ark of the Covenant with them because they bring the presence of God with them and they go, okay, great, and then they win the battle and okay. Is this that? Is this like a good, let's bring the woman of God? Or is this hesitation? Is this doubt? Is this a positive or negative?
It's negative.
I think he was a bit of a wuss. I really do. No, I really do. Because it
Be
took
careful, you might leave it headed.
That's okay. Because he's obviously not trusting God like she's trusting God.
Yeah.
And she's the wise judge. Everybody comes to her, and she says, look, this is what God told me to do. This is what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, she could be doubtful. He could be doubtful in general. But I think he's sort of partly
Mm-hmm.
a wimp a little bit.
Okay.
But she also asked him, did not the Lord tell you? Like, so it's not like it's coming from her. She knew that God was telling him to do it.
So you think it's a past thing that like he already knew he was supposed to do this?
Yeah, that's what I get at.
Okay, that's interesting. Does anyone disagree with either of those? Does anyone think that like this was good, perfectly fine?
Well,
Like him insisting that she come?
I don't think it was, but
Yeah.
I,
Does this remind you of any other event in the Bible?
Well, the spies recommended you go in the promised land, and the others said, no, you shouldn't do it because there's giants there.
Yeah.
You know, they have big armies, so they didn't want to go in, but God said he would be with them, they had to take it.
Yeah.
it's really good.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of that. That kind of speaks to the faithlessness. Yeah.
It's sort of a Gideon thing, sort of a little bit, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wanted extra confidence too.
Yeah.
Then when God gave it to him, he's doing more.
Yeah.
A little bit more, so,
Yeah.
so he,
Yeah, what it made me
her
think
confidence
of.
her confidence rubbed off on him.
Yeah. Yeah, what it made me think of, the way it's phrased, I was thinking of the interaction between Moses and God, when God tells them what's going to happen, and he says he's going to send an angel with them. But Moses says, no, if your spirit goes not with me, I don't want to go, basically. That's what I thought of, and I still agreed with the general consensus. I almost wonder if it's, like maybe, okay, if you've been reading the Bible through to Judges, you've already seen that back in Exodus. God went with them and it was fine, because it was, no, I want God with me. It was an act of faith. And then I don't know if this is an inversion of that. Like maybe it's supposed to trigger that in your mind. But when he's saying it, it's an act of doubt, maybe. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Well, but that's what I got the impression that he's already been told that, and she's kind of like saying, hey, didn't God tell you to do this? That's how I read it.
Okay.
So it would be like an act of not having faith.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't read it that way, but I mean, it doesn't say otherwise. Yeah, I guess that's the initial assumption either of us bring to the text of like, when she calls him, is that her saying it for the first time, or does he already know? I don't know. It doesn't really answer that. Okay, so we're going to be on page 48. Now, let's take another look quick at the battle plan. Okay, so like verse 6.5, like halfway through verse 6, Deborah says, hath not the Lord God of Israel commanded, saying, go, draw toward Mount Tabor, and take with thee 10,000 men, children of Naphtali, and of the children of Zebulun, and I will draw unto thee to the river Kishon, Sisera, the captain of Jabin's army, with chariots and his multitude. I will deliver them into your hand, into thine hand. Okay, so it's a pretty straightforward thing that she says. So she says, all right, take all your troops. You're going to go to Mount Tabor, and Sisera will be drawn around the river Kishon, and then there's going to be a battle. Without knowing anything else, sound like an all right plan? Like there's not a trick, like there's nothing to that, right? I mean, in theory. I mean, like it's just a straightforward, all right, go to the mountain, he'll come out to near the river, there'll be a fight. Okay, great. Simple enough. So as the book points out, and I very trickily found on maps, because these are very small areas that they're talking about, where that ends up being, you're sort of in the northern part of Israel, this tiny little river Kishon. It ends up being, the book names it the plain of Esdraelon. So the spot where they are from Mount Tabor to the river, it ends up making them fight in this big open plain. Knowing what you know about the armies, does that change what you think of the battle plan at all?
They'll have the advantage of flat land for their chariots.
Yeah. Yeah. So the people with the 900 iron chariots, you give them an open plain that they're just going to roll right through. They're already on a mountain. They're on Mount Tabor. That's where the troops are supposed to be. The, I guess, smart, like human tactical thing to do is try to draw them up the mountain. And if you're familiar with Star Wars, you know the high ground, that's the place to be. So chariots, they're no good on mountains. That's kind of where you want to draw troops. But they say, no, we're going to go fight in the middle of this plain. And you're sort of setting up this, like, God succeeding with extraordinary odds against you, sort of like a David and Goliath type thing. Not only do you have a bigger army, we're going to fight you in a place that's gives an advantage, theoretically, to that bigger army. So that's sort of the faith thing that's being set up. Go ahead.
Also, another thing I think you want to not forget to say is it's kind of like the plot of Magnificent Seven and 30 other thousand movies and stories.
Mm-hmm.
They had, not only did they have a shield or spear between them, but so they weren't soldiers.
Yeah.
And they're fighting not only a guy with 900 chariots and 10,000 men, I think it was. They're all soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they do. So I think that's important to look at the odds when you're looking at the odds.
Yeah, that's a good point. So that's what we're setting up here. That's the battle that's being proposed. And maybe at that point we can cut them a little bit of slack on, like, hey, you know what? Why don't you come with me on this? Because it's not looking like a good situation. Okay? All right, let's look at verse... No, I actually want to read this to you. Yeah. I want to read this to you out of the book. I think this is just in my book. Maybe. It says, for what it's worth, Barak hailed from Naphtali, one of the tribes most affected by Jabin's oppression. Furthermore, he was from Kadesh, a city very close to Hazor, Jabin's capital. Thus, Barak had a lot at stake. He knew firsthand the oppression of his people. What are your thoughts on that? This is the second person. If you remember last week, we talked about Ehud. That enemy had taken over the city of Jericho, and they said, Ehud's a Benjamite. Jericho is right there. This is like the second guy in this situation. What do you think about that?
I think a lot of times God raises up people within the people.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why they rejected Christ, because they said, well, we know him.
Mm. Yeah, okay.
So,
Yeah.
Also, both of these examples you're using, these people have been oppressed for years.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody at some point, more than somebody, is going to be really just, they've had it.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to put him in charge because he's just really going to go nuts.
Yeah.
You know, like, what's his face did with the spear? Kill all those people with...
Oh, Shamgar.
I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you know, kill all those people with just the spear. You know, he...
Push a guy far enough, they'll kill you with an ox goad.
Snap, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he knows, if he's so close, I mean, he can know, he knows their ways as well.
Mm.
It was still slanted, but he still kind of knows on it.
Yeah.
Just like the other guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, those are good points. And I think what the text also is kind of bringing out that we're seeing in this study, we've talked in past lessons about some of the idea that some very naturalistic looking things like rising empires, like oppression, like battles, have a spiritual component to it where you could think, oh, yeah, that nation rose up because of good economic policy and this and that. And you go, well, no, the Bible says God strengthened them. If we expect that the way God always works is like divine lightning from heaven, that kind of thing, then our view of how God works with humanity is probably skewed. So like, God doesn't just, let's do another 10 plagues of Egypt. Like, no, he's going to raise up someone from among the actual people. Like, Barak was just a guy under this situation. So, I think this book actually does a lot to spiritualize what happens in what we could call normal life, that God and normal life kind of go hand in hand. The book didn't talk about it, but I thought that was interesting that you have another judge who's directly affected, and that's all right, we can move on. Okay, let's look at verse 15. No, actually, I'm sorry, 14. So they're setting up for this battle. Verse 14, and Deborah said to Barak, up, for this is the day which the Lord has delivered Sisera into thine hand. Is not the Lord gone out before thee? So Barak went down from Mount Tabor, and 10,000 men after him. And the Lord discomfited Sisera, and all his chariots, and all his host with the edge of the sword before Barak, so that Sisera lighted down off his chariot and fled away on his feet. Okay, that's not a lot there. What happened in this battle?
Guys run down off the mountain, and Sisera's men were disoriented. God disoriented them, and then Barak's men just took them all out, and then Sisera flees.
Yeah.
What was that? Well, I mean, it was a physical, maybe God did it again with his own creation. He made the mountains move, he made the ground shake, and the waters that are normally not there in the river came out. So everything disoriented, and he sent the rain. So you know how bad your day is, you have a bad day, and on top of it rains, you know. All that.
Well, so you're jumping ahead a little bit, you're jumping around. So here's the interesting thing, and here's why it's interesting. Yeah, see, because you read all ahead, you know. So, yeah, based on these verses, verse 15, all we have about this battle, the Lord discomfited Sisera and all his chariots and all his host with the edge of the sword before Barak. So Sisera, got down off his chariot, ran away. So in chapter 4, like the actual events, that's all we have. That's all that's going on there. So that's why I made the point that when we get to the song, there's all this detail that never came up. Okay, so let's jump ahead to verse, chapter 5. Chapter 5. I'm getting my text mixed up here a little bit. Okay. What am I missing here? We're on different pages. Sorry about that. Oh, yeah, okay, I'm sorry, yeah. Yep, that's exactly what it is, yep. Yeah, I was looking at the wrong, yeah. Okay, we're good. Okay, so chapter 5, verse 4. Deborah's singing, the Lord, when thou wentest out of Seir, when thou marchest out of the field of Edom, the earth trembled, the heavens dropped, the clouds also dropped water. The mountains melted from before the Lord, even that Sinai from before the Lord God of Israel. Now, there are a few things that are weird in this text. So when I was just reading this all through, and I get to this description, I think like, okay, it's a song. She's waxing poetic. I didn't think much of it. When you're reading through the Bible and there's especially like a description, a poetic description, like a song of God going out to defeat someone. The idea of like, oh, the ground shook. And like the Psalms are full of this stuff. Like David is being saved from Saul, and the ground shakes, and there's like this cataclysmic kind of stuff going on. And it's a song. It's a psalm. You know the event that he's talking about, and it's putting it in like cosmic terms. That's how I took this at first. And then we also have the weird line in verse 5. Okay, so the mountains melted from before the Lord, even that Sinai from before the Lord God of Israel. And I looked at that and I said, I don't know what that sentence means. So I looked it up. This is Baptist heresy. I looked it up in a few different translations. And pro tip, if you look things up in different translations and there's wide variance of like differences in what people think it says, that's probably a good hint that the underlying, in this case, Hebrew, is vague, a little unclear. When you're dealing with like a several thousand-year-old dead language, you just get passages that you have like wide disagreement on. So I got one that basically phrased that as, the mountains melted before the Lord, the one of Sinai, from before the Lord God of Israel. Like we're just specifying mountains melted before the Lord, the God of Sinai, the God of Israel. And then another one phrased it as, the mountains melted before the Lord, even Sinai, from before the God of Israel. So by phrasing it that way, they actually took it back to like a history lesson. Like she's comparing what God did at Sinai with the mountains quaking and the smoke and thunder to what God did on the battlefield, like another poetic description. I was kind of confused. I have a little bit of trouble with this passage, to be perfectly honest with you. However, it keeps developing. Okay, so one of the things to focus on that sort of got brought up already is verse 4, that Lord, when thou wentest out of Seir, when thou marchest out of the field of Edom, so the earth trembled, the heavens dropped, the clouds also dropped water. So in this verse, there's some mention of rain. And again, this wasn't in chapter 4, so the song is just adding layers to it. And then if we read on to verse 20, she says, they fought from heaven, the stars in their courses fought against Sisera. She's adding like a cosmic spiritual dimension to it. Verse 21, the river of Kishon swept them away, that ancient river, the river Kishon. O my soul, thou hast trodden down in strength. Then were the horse hoofs broken by the means of prancing or tramplings and prancings of their mighty ones. So it's odd that in the original description of the events, you have the army was, the Lord discomfited the army and they were killed. And then you have this mention of rain, and then you have mention of the horses, because the river's overflowing, that they're breaking hooves. It's got the idea of, talk about prancing, that it seems to be, you can translate that word like prancing, trampling, or plunging, like you're dealing with what is now a muddy field instead of that great plain that was going to be awesome for chariots. So even though I was a little confused, to be perfectly honest, with verse 4 and 5 that we looked at, especially the one about the mountain, I'm not sure what's intended there. It seems that she's laying out a picture that the way that the Lord got this victory for them was, it looks like an open plain, it looks good for chariots, but there's going to be heavy rain that is going to come, that is going to soak that field, that's going to overflow this river. So their chariots are now of no effect. They do nothing. That was a long explanation, but it was kind of scattered, and I guess it's not really our place to question why the Lord inspired things to be written down a certain way, but it wasn't the most concise description that could have been given. I think we can say that. Okay. Let's, yeah, we're doing all right on time. All right. We'll move on a little bit to the battle's over, but the story keeps going. Okay. So, for starters, who has Psalm 20, verse 7?
Some trust in chariots and some in horses, but we will remember the name of the Lord our God.
Yeah, so that's written by David, it seems. So, a few hundred years later, it seems like the lesson has stuck, at least in the head of some people, that the victory that they need comes from the Lord, not from the big firepower, not from anything that he could possibly do. All right, but let's look at, we have victory and the story continues. Back in chapter 4, look at verse 15. And the Lord discomfited Sisera and all his chariots and all his hosts with the edge of the sword before Barak. So Sisera lighted down off his chariot and fled away on his feet. But Barak pursued after the chariots and after the host, unto Harosheth of the Gentiles, and all the host of Sisera fell upon the edge of the sword, and there was not a man left. Howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, and there was peace between Jabin, the king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. Just for reference, we know nothing about Heber the Kenite. Don't know who that is, don't know why he has peace with the Gentile king. He just does. And that's why it seems like Sisera runs there. He's on his way back to the big stronghold that his king has. It does on... If you have it in your book, maybe at the bottom of page 50, a phrase that starts with, the Kenites were not Israelites. The Kenites were not Israelites. They were not part of the battle between Israel and Sisera. Jael could have remained uninvolved. Actually, no, let's leave that for a little bit. We're giving away the ending too much.
Technically, they gave away the ending in chapter 4.
Where? Well, I mean, yeah, we're going to keep reading into that.
No, but I mean, she did the prophecy.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm just, like, that wasn't mentioned tonight, maybe for a specific reason.
Oh, no,
I
yeah.
don't know, but, see, and that's another reason why I think Barak was kind of wimpy, people say.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just because, okay, he definitely did the wrong thing. Because he was told there was going to be consequences. If you bring me along, there's going to be consequences. And they told him what the consequences were.
Yeah, we did read the text. We didn't actually talk about it, though.
That's what I mean. You passed over it.
Yeah. Do you want to tell people what the consequence was?
Well, in number 9, she said to him, Deborah said to Barak, if you want me to come with you, I'll go with you. But there's going to be a woman who's going to be part of this whole battle thing. And because you're coming with me, you're not going to get the credit for winning this battle. This woman's going to get the credit. So he knew that going in after he had to have her come with him. I'm just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. We read the text, but we didn't talk about that. And that probably does factor into whether or not bringing her along was the good decision. Yeah, he loses his glory, his, honor. Yeah, so he obviously plays a big part in the battle, but he won't be remembered as the one who saved Israel, who won the day. Let's pick up at verse 17. Just reread that. Howbeit Sisera fled away on his feet to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, and there was peace between Jabin, king of Hazor, and the house of Heber the Kenite. And Jael went out to meet Sisera, and said unto him, Turn in, my lord, turn in to me, fear not. And when he had turned in unto her into the tent, she covered him with a mantle. And my Bible has a note that that can mean rug or blanket as well. And he said unto her, Give me, I pray thee, a little water to drink, for I am thirsty. And she opened a bottle of milk, and gave him drink, and covered him. And again he said unto her, Stand in the door of the tent, and it shall be when any man doth come and inquire of thee, and say, Is there any man here? That thou shalt say, No. Then Jael, Heber's wife, took a nail of the tent, and took a hammer in her hand, and went softly unto him, and smote the nail into his temples, and fastened it to the ground, for he was fast asleep and weary. So he died. I guess so. That's pretty funny. Yeah, so prophecy came true. This woman who sort of appears out of nowhere, she ends up being the one to kill this big, bad commander in charge who's been oppressing Israel for years. Okay, so...
I have a question.
Yes.
So, was it their way back in these days? You know how you're always saying all means all? You're always saying that for almost 30 years. But yet, when they wrote this,
Yeah.
they killed them all. Well, how could they have killed them all if he got loose?
Mm-hmm.
They didn't kill them all unless they don't count the generals. I don't know. I'm just
Yeah,
saying.
I don't know if they're probably just talking about the men on the battlefield.
Well, he was on the battlefield. But
Oh, you mean-
he left the battlefield.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what's that? Good. I'm just curious. Because, like a lot of times, you're a peasant, you don't count. That kind of thing.
Well, I don't know that he kills them all initially. They're all discomfited.
Right, he's chasing them down.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's when he runs away.
They're done chasing them down.
Like, apparently this...
But they said they killed them all before he ever died. That's all I'm getting at. It's a technicality.
Oh, I see. I
It's
see
a
what you're saying.
technicality for sure.
Right, and technically he left the battlefield.
Yeah, that was the impression I got, that it was
Against the
in...
rules.
It was in confusion. There's the flooding. He runs away because they're being defeated. And it seems like the troops kill the troops on the battlefield. And then you still have Barak chasing him. Yeah, so about halfway down page 50, that's the thing I started reading before, but it mentioned that Jael killed him, so I wanted to stop. The Kenites were not Israelites. They were not a part of the battle between Israel and Sisera. Jael could have remained uninvolved. She may have had no knowledge of Sisera's defeat. Since they were at peace, she offered Sisera hospitality. But observing his appearance, the fact that he was alone and his request to lie if anyone asked for him, she must have surmised that he had lost the battle and Hazor might soon come under attack. She decided where to cast her lot. She chose to be identified with the people of God. That is interesting. I mean, there's kind of a bit of quick deduction going on there on her part. Like,
She was smart.
seems to be, yeah.
Well,
Or risky. I mean, you don't know.
her husband wasn't Israelite, but she could have been.
Could have been.
Just saying.
Yeah,
she
it's not
could take her
mentioned.
husband's
Yeah.
people.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's interesting that she technically has no knowledge of what's going on. Maybe she's just a murderous psychopath, who knows? But we don't get that impression.
Now, but see, because the whole thing was prophesized, and God had a dealing in that, just like we learned,
Yeah.
right, in the sermon about even people who, in this case, she was like in between, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But even bad people have a part in God's plan.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
he used to murder somebody, in a sense,
Yeah. All right, so we left Barak in a tent, not doing so well. Sisera in a tent, not doing so well. Verse 22, chapter 4, 22. And behold, as Barak pursued Sisera, Jael came out to meet him, and said unto him, Come, and I will show you the man whom thou seekest. And when he came into her tent, behold, Sisera lay dead, the nail was in his temples. So, in your book, page 51, question 15, what do you think went through Barak's mind when he saw Sisera dead in Jael's tent?
Probably remember what Deborah said to him.
There goes my commission.
I think he probably did think that, but I think first he was just amazed that this woman killed the guy. I mean, he was the whole leader.
Mm-hmm.
And,
That took a lot of guts.
this woman was just doing wash when he showed up. And, you know, I mean, she did lie a lot to him, you know what I mean? He said, you're gonna stick up for me? Sure.
Yeah.
But I bet you, I would say he was amazed at first.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't expect that when
Yeah.
he showed up. Then he may have thought, oh, geez, here it is. This is what she meant.
Yeah. Yeah, because up until then, it seems like, not discounting what Deborah said, but all normal progression of events here should be, well, Barak is chasing him. Of course, he's going to be the one to kill him. Like, who? You can't foresee this situation. Probably definitely made him rethink his doubting of God from earlier. And we see that Deborah's faith in God was key to victory over the enemy. Barak and his army rode the coattails of Deborah's faith. I liked how they put that. Sisera put his faith in horses and chariots. Okay, so we're wrapping up here. We have a few things. I don't know if I want to get into that. So for what it's worth, we saw that Naphtali and Issachar? No. Naphtali and another tribe went, and 10 others did not. So again, it's the way that they split into chapters 4 and 5, that in chapter 4 it's just like, all right, you just got these 2 tribes going to war. Cool, no big deal. Doesn't seem like a problem. And then in her song, she really throws it down. She gets on the other tribes that seem to have been called to battle, but didn't go for a host of reasons. Actually, why don't we look at that real quick? Chapter 5, verse 15. This is still her song. She says, And the princes of Issachar were with Deborah, even Issachar and also Barak. He was set on foot to the valley. For the division of Reuben, there were great thoughts there were great thoughts of heart. Why abodest thou among the sheepfold to hear the bleatings of the flock? For the divisions of Reuben, there were great searchings of heart. So Reuben is a really big tribe, and it seems like she's talking about divisions of heart, that for whatever reason, they kind of had very strongly mixed feelings about that, and they decided not to come and help. They're just kind of hanging back at home. Verse 17, Gilead abode beyond Jordan. And why did Dan remain in his ships? Asher continued on the seashore and abode in his breaches, that like small rivers. Zebulun and Naphtali were a people that jeopardied or put their lives in jeopardy unto the death in the high places of the field. The kings came and fought the kings of Canaan in Tanakh by the waters of Megiddo. They took no gain of money. So, why do you guys think like some of these people didn't come and show up?
Well, sometimes they're so oppressed that they're like, we just can't take the chance of losing.
Dealing with putting up with their oppression instead of risking.
Thoughts of freedom.
Well, they heard about the battle plan. So that was some join,
Yeah.
and some do.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Gilead, so there were a couple tribes that were on the other side of the Jordan River. So the Jordan River sort of ends up being like the second parting of the Red Sea event. Moses did that in the beginning to get them out of Egypt. And then with the next generation after the wilderness wandering, Joshua does that with the new people who are supposed to take the promised land. The Jordan parts, and they go through on dry land just like they did 40 years ago back at the Red Sea. And two tribes decided, no, actually this land here, this is pretty good land. We're going to stick here. And there's kind of this symbolic thing of you didn't pass through the waters to go into the promised land. And Moses, or Joshua, I guess, at the time, made the point like, okay, you guys can stay here, but look, you're still part of us. When there's need, we still need to be able to get to you, to interact. Basically, he described this exact situation that, like, hey, yeah, you're on the other side of the river, but you still need to be involved in this. So there's a sense to which some of the tribes of Israel had distanced themselves from the whole and didn't really think of them as brothers to the extent that they probably should have. And then, I just think this is funny. You probably won't. Chapter 5, verse 23, because every good song needs to end with some cursings. Curse ye, Meroz, said the angel of the Lord. Curse ye bitterly, the inhabitants thereof, because they came not to the help of the Lord, to the help of the Lord against the mighty. I think that's funny, because we have no idea who Meroz is. It seems to be a city. There are a couple, archaeological guesses of names that are similar from the region. We don't know who they are. It's not mentioned in the Bible, but apparently it seems like they could have helped and didn't, I guess. So in verse 20, when she makes it cosmic, she says, they fought from heaven. The stars in their courses fought against Sisera. And oftentimes stars are linked to angelic beings. So when we say okay, God fought the battle with them, the idea of angelic beings also being involved in this victory is not out of the realm of possibility. So I was looking at interpretations of Meroz. Some ancient Jewish scholars were like, oh, well, yeah, so Meroz has clearly got to be some divine being who didn't come to help. And you're like, what? That doesn't seem like the natural reading of that.
That's part of the curse, that we don't know who they are. Well, I mean, sincerely, that they're kind of erased from history in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility.
Well, and they paid for it at the very end.
For being cursed?
Well, verse 31 pretty much tells the tale.
Oh, yeah, that's a good way to end a song. So let all the enemies perish, let all thine enemies perish, O Lord, but let them that love him be as the sun when he goeth forth in his might, and the land had rest 40 years. I imagine that last sentence is not part of the song. But yeah.
The good guys, technically, the ones who believed in God got the 40 years, and the ones who didn't died.
Yeah, and apparently in the 1700s, it wasn't uncommon that the phrase, the sin of Meroz is a phrase used for dereliction of duty, laziness in something that should be, that you're obligated to do. I didn't realize that, but yeah, apparently that crops up. Yeah, what a very specific phrase to pick up. Okay, so we got to wrap up. So we don't usually go over the making it personal because they're usually very personal. And then I had a conversation with my father today who said, you know what, I didn't feel like these were that personal. I thought these seemed pretty personal. So I was curious as to if you had any answers to this that you wanted to share. Yeah, I mean, you were the one who were like, yeah, this seems like something we can talk about.
Well, I said last week, if you looked at the ones that were personal the last 4 weeks,
Yeah.
they were pretty personal. these are, and these I thought were more, they're just not worded that way, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how was your faith affected by studying Deborah's faith? Well, to me, the simple answer was, it wants me to do better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's what I got out of her, because it makes me want to trust God more.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because even the most perfect Christian isn't perfect, so you should want to, you want some more.
Mm-hmm.
You should believe what your wife says, too. Put your trust in that.
Well, we heard that prophetesses are very rare, so yeah, you need a palm tree.
Okay, now, like, even 22, I don't mind answering that. Like, how does your faith affect those around you? Are they discouraged by your level of faith or emboldened? Well, and I don't mean to be disrespectful to the question, but this guy who wrote this really has to ask them.
Yeah.
Like, I can't answer that truthfully.
Yeah, I got you.
No, that's my answer. Like, if you were to actually say, hey, Paul, what do you think? Are people's faith stronger because I exist or less? Then, well, I don't know. You have to ask everybody at the table. I don't suggest you do that, but But no, I just didn't, like, and then they talk about in 22, name someone who helped to fortify your faith in God. Like, again, yeah, it's personal, but I don't think it's anything that's, you don't want to leak out, so to speak. It's just somebody who means a lot to you, has affected your life in a positive way, especially if it's, religiously.
Yeah. Yeah, 22 is the one I circled, that if we were going to talk about any of them, I liked 22. And maybe just more of like a, not getting to know you questions, but like interesting. So, of course, name someone who's helped fortify your faith in God. What did that person do to build your faith? So, of course, our answer is all Pastor Kohler. That's got to be the answer, of course.
Yeah, I don't know, I understand why.
Yeah.
It's blasphemy.
Yeah.
I put Pastor and my father for pretty much the same reasons. Knowledge, especially from Pastor as an adult, as me being an adult, I put him down for knowledge and guidance because that's what I have felt all of this time. And then as far as Dad goes, it was more parenting because, I wasn't an adult then. But in both cases, both men, their actions were of God. So that's how I answered that, and very comfortable with that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else with that? So the idea of, does it even have to be exactly how the question's worded? Like anyone who is particularly formative in your faith, in your walk, whether it be someone like a minister, we all acknowledge Pastor Kohler as the greatest pillar of our faith, collectively, of course. Past preacher, even like a biblical character who you particularly look at, Any thoughts on that? Anyone jump to your mind?
Just that you can encourage people's faith in a lot of different ways. It doesn't have to be like this big battle you're going to fight.
Yeah.
It could be just encouraging somebody to find consolation, comfort, and reward in a time of need. That encourages faith too, in a very different way, though.
Yeah.
But it still guides towards faith. So there's a multitude of ways. What we have in the text is something of a strong battle that has to take place. So even though that's the emphasis, there's a lot of ways you can encourage people's faith. They can just watch how you live and how you walk with God. Would encourage faith too. And that's just a daily walk with the Lord. What somebody's like. As long as you don't go too close, because you find feet of So there's many different ways to encourage somebody when it comes to how much faith they're going to be challenged to actually trust God. How much?
I mean, like, as far as like talking about trust in God. How many times has Job been brought up? Like you're saying,
Mhm.
people in the Bible who were just, yeah, I wouldn't mind being, a little bit like that.
Mhm.
Moses was a fantastic leader. I wouldn't mind being a little bit like that.
Mhm. Yeah. Anyone else spring to mind?
Say David,
David?
because even with all of his faults and everything like that, truly loved God and kept coming back. So,
Mhm.
Yes, he paid the consequences of different things, but he never stopped following.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I was thinking about that, and I wasn't thinking of David, but I find myself in the same boat where, yeah, of course you can look up to people who like excel at faith, if I can put it that way. But then, so for some reason, the first person who popped into my head was Elijah, and specifically his like time of desert failure. But then God brings him back. So almost like a David, like a fail. Like, so I guess the faith is actually encouraged by God in the life of someone else. And I guess there has to be an element of them not giving up, giving in either. So there's definitely faith on all of their parts as well. But
You gotta remember, because especially in the New Testament, Christ honored some people that had little faith.
mm-hmm.
Some other people with great faith, and most of them were in between some. So,
Mm-hmm.
because all our lives it's progress.
Yeah.
So if you don't have like great faith and you're kind of a wuss like Paul said the word was, you shouldn't despair.
Mm-hmm.
Because God will take your little faith and increase it along the way if you trust.
Mm-hmm.
And I would think that possibly he learned a few lessons.
Yeah, I think so.
Um,
The man in the tent would have been a vivid image, I would imagine, that would stick with you. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't it like that, it's like that guy, remember, what's his name, Abimelech or whatever? He came to take that city and the old lady threw that millstone over the
Yeah.
roof or the wall of the city, hit him in the head, and he's crying out, somebody, kill me, so this, I don't get, my whole life story with some old lady from the side of the city over the wall threw this stone and hit me in the head. She got him, so
Yeah, he was embarrassed.
It's
like-
back then, right? It's
Yeah.
all, that Near Eastern stuff was all about honor and shame.
Yeah.
They're really big.
Your
about it.
skull's broken, you're bleeding out, and you're like, not a woman, not this old lady.
Yeah, we're not showing this here, we're just saying what it was like back then. We're not trying to, put that in.
He needs an honorable death,
Yeah.
worthy of Valhalla.
Of a warrior guy,
Mhm.
you don't have somebody throwing,
Yeah.
old lady throwing the wall next to you, What an ending of the book, That kind of thing.
But yeah, to reel this in, I think one of the things that can be difficult coming up with faith as we're reading a story like this, we typically don't have a massive ancient Near Eastern army to have faith and go out and fight. Life doesn't tend to typically look quite that over-the-top valiant, but I think we can still definitely take the faith ideas from people and have it, even the faith to make certain decisions, the faith to see the world in certain ways that God says that things actually function, the faith to direct our lives in certain ways that the world would probably think is pretty stupid, like spending an hour of your weekday, around here studying and discussing the Bible. Just decisions day to day, doing things in faith because you think, you hope, you trust in God that they will pay off for His kingdom instead of necessarily what we want to do at the time. So faith can be big and huge and flashy, and then it can also be hopefully brought down into the ordinary and be just as profound in the end. So let's end there. You can feel free over the week to check out the Making It Personal questions and make them personal, but let's close in a word of prayer. Father, I thank you for the night that you've given us, for looking at your word, at this story and this song, and helping us to think about the nature of following you and not hesitating in following you, and just having some faith to make the decisions on things that we already know you want us to do. And that's what most of it tends to be in life, things that you've already told us that we know are good and right, and that we would just have enough faith to follow you in them, and that at the end you would be glorified and honored. So just pray that throughout this week you would help us consider how we walk in faith day in and day out. Lord, I pray that you'd bring us back safely next week and keep us safe as we go home. In your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. All right, thank you.